Hello, this is Mrs. Taylor, and I want to walk you through how to solve a radical equation using your calculator. So on your study guide number 8, the directions said use your calculator to estimate the solution to the equation below, provide a table and a sketch of a graph to support your answer. And so in order for me to use my calculator, the first thing I have to do is make sure that my equation is equal to 0. And in order to do that, I need to move this radical, square root of x plus 2, to the left side of the equal sign so that all of my terms are on one side. And so in order to do that, because I am moving the entire radical, I just subtract it from both sides. So it would look like this. Remember that when you add and subtract radicals, you don't combine them like you do when you multiply and divide. So it's just a really long equation. And once I subtracted it from the right, I'm left with 0 on the right. And that means now I'm ready to put it in my calculator. So I go to my y equals screen by pressing y equals. And I enter the square root of x plus 8. And I need to make sure that my cursor is outside of the radical when I type the -1. If you have an older version of the calculator, you have parentheses, and so you just finish off the square root with another parentheses. To get my cursor outside of the radical, I hit the right arrow key, and then -1, minus, and then the second radical, second square root of x plus 2. And then I am done, so hit enter. So the first thing we need to do is look at our table to find out what our solution is between, which two x values. And so if it's equal to 0, my solution is going to be somewhere between where my y values change from a negative to a positive, because 0 is between any negative and positive number. So in order to do that, first I want to make sure my table setup is correct. So I go to Second, Table Set, above Window. And I want it to start at 0, and I want it to count by ones. This little triangle means delta, which is change. So it's asking you, what do you want the x values to change by? And so to get down there, I press enter, and I want it to change by 1. And then make sure your independent and dependent's on auto, and then go to Second, Table, and there's my table. And what I'm looking for is where the y values change from negative to positive, because remember, in between there is going to be 0, and we're looking for where it equals 0. And so it changes from negative to positive here between x is 4 and x is 5, and so I want to state that as my estimate. And so I would state that x is between 4 and 5, and if I look at my table, I can verify at 4 it's positive and at 5 it's negative. And so also part of this is they want you to provide a table to support that. And so what I would do is I would create a table, just a simple t table with some x values, so maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then I would enter those y values that correspond. And we can round to 2 decimal places, so 0.16, 0.08, 0.01 down the line. Lucky for me though, I'm working on a computer, and so I can just copy and paste my table here. But you would just write it out, your x values and your y values. The next thing is I'm going to use my graph to narrow it down even more, because x being between 4 and 5 is a really wide gap, and it's not a very good estimate. So I'm going to go to my graph by pressing graph, and there's my curve. And what I'm looking for is where my curve crosses the x-axis, because that's going to be where y is 0. And that's called a 0. So in order to find that, I go to Second, Calculate, above the trace button. And number 2 says 0, and that's what I'm calculating, the 0 of this function. So press 2. And it's going to ask you left bound, right bound, guess. Your left bound is your lower x value. So instead of moving your cursor back and forth, you can just enter this 4 that you've already discovered using your table. So my left bound is x equals 4. Press enter. My right bound is to the right, which is x equals 5. I've already found that. 5. Enter. And do I want it to guess? Why, yes, I do. So I press enter. And the calculator will do the guesswork for me. So the calculator estimates that this graph crosses the x-axis at approximately 4.25. So my solution using my graph is x is approximately 4.25. And so I would write that out. But it also wants me to provide a sketch of my graph. And it's a sketch. So that means it doesn't have to be exact. But the one thing that does is I know that it's going to cross the x-axis at 4.25 or approximately 4.25. So that's the one thing I definitely have to have accurate on my graph. So if I sketch it, and I'm going to use my mouse to do this, so forgive me if it's a bit messy, but I'm going to sketch my graph, and the one thing I have to have is that 4.25. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and about a fourth away between 4 and 5 is 4.25. So that's the one point I have to have accurate. And if I look at my graph, it's going to be above over here to the left of the y-axis and slowly travel down and then cross at approximately 4.25. So somewhere over here, slowly travel down, and then when I reach that 4.25, it's got to cross. And then I need to put an arrow, which is a little difficult when you're drawing with a mouse. There we go. So yes, that is a very, very rough sketch, but it will suffice, especially since I was using a mouse to draw it. Anyways, no matter what, I have that approximate x equals 4.25. And that would be how you would use your calculator to estimate the solution to a radical equation.